Hello, my name is Duane Nickerson, and my current job, if you will, is Director of the Arts at a school in Canada called Ridley College. I oversee visual art, music, theater, and film. And I want to make it clear at the outset of this presentation that although I am focusing on the more traditional art practices, studio art practices that involve painting and drawing and sculpture and the use of materials, I appreciate and understand the importance of image exploration that also includes technology. I just want to make that clear at the beginning. So as I said, I'm a Canadian educator. I'm also a practicing artist, and I've taught art to senior secondary students using various art curriculum models in my career. The British A-levels, Advanced Placement, Studio and Art History, the Ontario Secondary School program, as well as the International Baccalaureate program. I've taught in Canada and Southeast Asia, and as I mentioned, the school where I currently teach is a large international boarding school with over 60 different nationalities present among the student body. You might recognize the similarity between the title of my presentation and Walter Benjamin's seminal 1936 essay, Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. In this work, he uses the term aura to describe that feature of the original physical work that distinguishes it from a reproduction and lends it, in his sense, more aesthetic authenticity. My presentation will suggest that the student engaging with the physical materials and processes of making art will come to better appreciate and understand the meaning we associate with those objects in museums and galleries we have that are physical and that we have set aside as markers of human achievement. And more importantly, students will develop a sense of competence from engaging with this type of studio activity. Three things I have noticed in many years I have been teaching visual art. Teenagers are deeply interested in self-expression and learning about the techniques and materials used by visual artists to create images. 2, teens seem to acquire a sense of self-confidence as they see how their hands can develop more sensitivity and accuracy when using materials and tools. They recognize their progress. 3, when using their hands, teens are more able to sustain extended focus, that capacity that is becoming weakened by the current screen-centered social media environment that is engaging the brains of our children for many hours every single day. I use the word engage rather loosely, as we are all aware that the algorithms driving screen content today are designed to keep eyes on screens, period. Google designers have described this central design concept as maximizing customer engagement. It could also be described as producing a current of dopamine transmission to keep the brain transfixed for as long as possible. The use of likes, hearts, followers, all follow the basic tenets of behaviorism made famous by B.F. Skinner and others in the 1930s. These interactive features are rewards that are used essentially to control behavior. This is a model of the homunculus human. It's a depiction of the body in which the proportions of the body are changed to correspond to the proportion of the human brain dedicated to processing the sensory and motor functions of the body. What is striking about this image is the size of the hands. As an artist, I intuitively understand this image because when I am painting, most of my energy is devoted to directing my hands. My hands control the experience and engage with the material at almost a subconscious level. As an art teacher, when I am teaching painting, most of the conversation I have with students involves drawing attention to the material and how to manipulate it. from using a palette knife to turn the paint while mixing, to drawing attention to the feel of different brush strokes and the direction of different brush strokes, the viscosity of the paint, etc. This tactile experience is inherently engaging, and I can see that students are activating deep, highly evolved features of their brains when they are using their hands to manipulate the paint and the brushes. And of course, the development of the neural networks that control hand-eye coordination are those same networks that are used by dentists, surgeons, mechanics, and a host of other professions. And I draw this to the students' attention when we're working in the studio. The human brain hasn't really changed much in 40,000 years, despite the technological and cultural evolution that it has been subjected to. Cultural evolution is a much faster process than biological evolution, and the features of our biology that drive us to pursue refined movement of our hands are very old and very powerful. One persistent theory of evolution that led Homo sapiens to develop enormous brains relative to other species was the development of bipedalism that freed up the hands to evolve into a shape that allowed for complex tasks that required sophisticated manipulation of tools and objects in three-dimensional space. This slow change in our brains and anatomy took millions of years and led to first a mimetic culture that allowed early humans to copy sequential tasks from each other. The complex copying allowed for the production of tools and laid the foundation for language. Then, around 40,000 years before present, the development of mythic culture arose that still serves as the foundation for thinking today. This was when musical instruments, sculpture, painting, and body adornment first appears within the evidence of human habitation on the planet. If one were to simplify our genetic heritage, it would go something like: hand shape evolved in response to the environment. Humans direct hands to make tools to survive. Humans explore materials with hands to create meaning. Our behavior today is still largely directed by our hands and the neural circuitry that supports them. The study of genetically directed behavior is problematic for many reasons, but it's also useful when observing distinctive behavioral traits of different species. In Canada, not sure if these exist in Texas, we have a large rodent called a beaver with a flat tail that builds dams by chewing on trees. It nests under the water, so the dams create large wetlands for the beaver's lodge. One of the main activities a beaver engages in is chewing trees and dragging the pieces of wood to build the dams, to create the wetlands. This is not a learned behavior. It is directed by the genetic code that resides within the beaver. This genetic code is inherited, and it impacts the beaver's capacity to survive. Two well-documented genetically directed human behaviors are seeking stimulation and social interaction, which is a foundation for human learning. Today we have supercomputers tracking our seeking behavior on the internet and feeding us the illusion of stimulation and social interaction. This, of course, is an illusion because the actual complexity of the stimulation is shallow, as is the social interaction, because it does not include the physical sensations that emanate from the living body of the person who's doing the interacting. The supercomputer compensates for the shallowness of the experience by ramping up the level of threat with each story or video that we are fed in the endless scroll of information. Conspiracy, argument, conflict all trigger our amygdala and make us more vigilant, drawing us deeper into the world of the AI-produced flow of visual and auditory stimulation. The interesting thing about this situation is that the neural pathways in our brain are wired to accommodate short-term memory processing of disparate information at an incredibly fast speed. It is documented that the capacity of short-term memory function in the adolescent population today is actually increasing. However, the slower engagement with information through extended reading, writing, engagement with tools and materials, something that we used to call study, allows our brains to move information into long-term memory so that it is there for retrieval when we are building our larger narratives or schemas of meaning. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, a psychologist, coined the term flow in the 1970s to describe a state of immersion in an activity where the participant loses track of time and emerges after a long period with a sense of accomplishment and joy from a given activity. He first discovered this unique mental state when observing visual artists at work. He stated that there were three key features of the flow experience. 1, the participant had to have a clearly defined goal. 2, the task needed to be intrinsically meaningful. And 3, the difficulty of the task needed to be at the edge of the individual's competence, meaning that it had to challenge the participant's ability, but not to the point where it was impossible. The experience of flow, as we all know, is readily accessible to students in the art room, because the use of the hands draws upon deeply rooted impulses, as does our fascination for observing and making images. Going back to the development of mythic culture, in which humans generated stories to explain life's mysteries, there is a recurring evidence throughout history that we expressed ourselves using images. Given the persuasiveness of image making in the human story through time, one could argue that image making is a genetically directed behavior. Today, this impulse to create images manifests most commonly in the ubiquitous use of cell phones to create and post images. Users of Instagram post 46,740 images every minute. On Facebook, 300 million photos get uploaded every single day. It would seem that we are still visual creatures, and we are wired to use our hands to engage with the world, even if that involves pressing a button on a camera. However, more significantly, this can be clearly seen if you give any 2-year-old a crayon. In my art room at Ridley College, currently I begin my grade 11 course, my IB1 course, with an oil painting project in which students are required to complete a self-portrait using a very limited palette and focusing on the issue of contrast. Students undertake research on a Baroque artist and are asked to analyze the work by observing contrast, composition or placement of the objects and the person, and how light is attended to. When engaging with the painting process, we begin with the basics: how to charge a palette, how to hold a palette, how to mix colors using a palette knife. Most students have never encountered this material before. Students begin by laying down an underpainting with burnt umber, in which they lay out the value structure of the work. Students then create a value scale of tints and shades, during which they discover the right proportions of colors to generate their own unique skin tone. They then begin their painting. During the 2 weeks of painting classes, I never have to ask students to put phones away. Within 1 week, students who were initially reticent about the process were fully immersed and had gained confidence in their paint mixing and application abilities. During the final critique of the works, most students began with the statement that I learned a lot, and went on to discuss the challenges and successes they had with the task, and were able to give very, very informative feedback to their peers about technical issues relating to the technique and processes. Every student engaged with the task. Some struggle, of course, but all of them resolved the task. All students displayed a heightened appreciation for the centuries-old practice of representational oil painting. The starting point for this exercise was a hands-on process in which students had a clear objective to demonstrate mastery of a process. There was very little time spent developing a narrative for the image, but we did discuss the idea of self-expression through portraiture, of course, even during the Baroque period. The how of the task superseded the why of the tasks, and students felt that they were well served by the exercise. It is after students have engaged with the technical aspects of oil painting that I introduce the issues of subject matter and artist intention. In my grade 11 class, IB1 class, I also introduce large format acrylic painting. At this juncture, I add to the mix the issue of representational versus non-representational imagery. We discuss early and mid-20th century abstraction, and students undertake research on a Western abstract artist and a non-Western tradition of abstraction, such as Islamic tessellations or Polynesian tattoo design. Students are asked to explore the material of acrylic paint, including gel medium, modeling paste, and gloss pouring medium. Students then develop a range of small acrylic studies in which they work out their own composition ideas and explore the material of the acrylic media. This task generates a confrontation with meaning and methodology, as students have to engage with the issue of meaning when there is no logic of reproduction involved in the process. Through this process, students acquire an understanding of how to apply different strategies of formal composition, or sheer expressive action, or both. And again, it is through the process of hands-on engagement with materials and processes that students learn how painting, as both a thing and an action, can in fact generate meaning. In addition to giving students ample opportunity to engage with hands-on experiences, I also ensure that students create a record of their research, planning, and thinking. This intentional reflection further entrenches an understanding of the fact that image making is a process with various steps and does not happen instantaneously with the press of a button or the swipe of a finger. I also, in my course, ensure that students have the chance to engage with the physical objects of art by going to galleries, as it is through the high resolution of encounter with a physical object that students further appreciate the evidence of the hand in the making process. In addition, students encounter the institution of the art gallery and the museum and see the craft of presentation, the theater of display that is an integral feature of the visual art tradition. Students also come to appreciate the authority that accompanies evidence of mastery that is beyond what they have attained thus far in the studio. This awareness of a canon that has come about due to the exceptional achievements of individuals gives the students a degree of conviction that the pursuit of excellence in art has value. In my experience, this conviction has a much more positive impact than the often heard claims these days made that a canon is merely the imposition of a narrative by privileged individuals. This reduction of human achievement to an exercise of power is, in my experience, one of the most destructive narratives in art education today. If children are taught that might is right, that whoever controls the narrative occupies the museum, we set the stage for totalitarianism and the banal social realist art/propaganda that has always accompanied past manifestations of this form of social organization. To summarize, as a teacher who tries to facilitate the full development of children, I believe that the Art Studio serves as a powerful antidote to the prevailing influence of screens and social media on children's cognitive and physical development. The hands-on engagement with materials and processes allows young people to activate deep evolutionary traits and build competencies that rely on visual acuity, hand-eye coordination, and an understanding of visual culture through history, through time. As we all know, a sense of competence in one's teenage years bolsters confidence and sets a sound foundation for identity formation. This is an age saturated in a cacophony of disparate images and sounds that erode attention and the development of schemas of meaning. The art room, I believe, can be a refuge where young people can engage with activity that enables them to build competence, to develop a sense of self, and create meaning that emanates from experiences that are deeply human.